Well, happy National Championship Day to everyone. Looking at Georgia and TCU and that matchup that we're going to see Monday night in the National Championship. But how does LSU fit into the mix? What does LSU have to do or to continue to do in order to make their way back in the national title game that this time next year, this time in 2025, we'll be talking about an LSU national championship? That's what I want to get into, plus so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, we're on YouTube as well. So check us out on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. Of course, Locked on LSU. We are part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU sports for almost 6-7 years now, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you'll know I'm not in my normal studio, so thanks for hanging tight with me while the Wi-Fi in my normal studio is getting worked on. Can't live with it, can't live without it. But I want to let y'all know that today's edition of Locked on LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So we've got a national championship game going on tonight, and it's almost like a bittersweet feeling because this is what we look forward to all season long is the big game, the big dance to see who's going to make it there. But it's also the sign of college football's almost over, and that's really sad. And I'm having a hard time dealing with that. And of course, I think we're all having a hard time dealing with the fact that there's a national title game tonight and LSU is not playing in it. So, what has Georgia done throughout Kirby Smart's tenure to get to this point? I always look at college football as being a copycat league. I think the NFL is really similar, right? So, the latest trend or the latest key to success, at least as far as the NFL is concerned, is you're bad enough that you can pick at the top of the draft. Maybe you're picking first, maybe you're picking in the top 5, and you draft and develop your quarterback of the future. That's what has been, at least in recent history, the most proven way to win a Super Bowl, to get to the playoffs. We saw it with Cincinnati. That's exactly why they drafted Joe Burrow. And that's exactly why the Cincinnati Bengals have been in the playoffs, have went to the Super Bowl last year, is because of their quarterback. Jacksonville Jaguars, same thing. They made the playoffs for the first time in years because they drafted Trevor Lawrence first overall. You can also say that the NFL is a copycat league because there are so many other teams that have copied, let's say, what the Rams are doing, or what the Rams did rather, how they got to a Super Bowl, because they dished out all the picks in order to get Matthew Stafford. Now, that's what the Denver Broncos did in order to get Russell Wilson. Now, it hasn't paid off like Matthew Stafford and the Rams did. Obviously, Broncos country, let's ride. But I think sports in general, not just the NFL, is a copycat league. College football is the exact same way. I think so many people have been trying to emulate, or so many programs have been trying to emulate what Nick Saban has done at Alabama. And there has been no team that has been able to come close to the amount of success that Alabama has had for an extended period of time. Sure, Clemson won a couple of national titles in 2016 and 2018, but overall, Clemson hasn't been back in the conversation. They went in 2019, obviously lost to LSU, but other than that, Clemson, I think we now look at as, sure, they might win the ACC because they're competing against really bad teams in the ACC, but I don't think we look at Clemson as being the same national powerhouse as we view Alabama, or at least the way that we have viewed Alabama over the past 10 or so years. The team that has come the closest to the amount of success that Alabama has had is Georgia. Georgia won a national title last year. And I think, to be completely honest with you, and I'll make my official predictions, I think they're going to do it again this year. And I think that they are going to become the very first team in the college football playoff era to win back to back national championships, which is a wild stat considering how many teams have been in the conversation and have been back year over year over year. So if we're going to call college football a copycat league, and if Georgia has emulated the same amount of success, or has at least come closest to emulating the same amount of success over a sustained period of time as Alabama has, then what's the formula? And coming up next, I want to get into how close LSU is into that formula. But let's just look at it. The formula that has kind of been laid out by Alabama and has kind of been copied by Georgia. And Georgia is the team that has come the closest to copying what Alabama has done, the success that they have gotten. So I think we've kind of seen from both Alabama and Georgia what you don't need. You don't need an elite quarterback. You don't absolutely positively need one. Now, if you could have an elite quarterback, absolutely, you take one. If you have the option, elite quarterback or game manager, of course you're going to take the elite quarterback. That makes your job so much easier. But whereas the NFL, I believe, is a quarterback-driven league, Georgia and Alabama has shown us that you don't necessarily need an elite quarterback. Stetson Bennett was not elite last year. Stetson Bennett isn't even elite this year. Yet Georgia won a national title last year and beat an elite quarterback in Alabama in the national title game last year. Stetson Bennett is a better quarterback in 2022 than he was in 2021. He's still not elite. He's not Bryce Young. He's not CJ Stroud. And Georgia's back in the conversation and is almost a 2-touchdown favorite over TCU in the national title game. So it makes the job easier when you do have an elite quarterback. We learned that lesson ourselves as LSU fans in 2019. That really the only difference between that LSU 2019 team and, let's say, the earlier teams with elite defenses was elite quarterback. You bring Joe Burrow in and all of a sudden the team is completely different. And all of a sudden this team is putting up 40, 50 points a game. That's the elite quarterback difference. But you don't necessarily need one. Alabama won national titles with A.J. McCarron. Where is A.J. McCarron now? I'm like, that's a genuine question that I'm asking because I don't know where he is now. I think we are learning that Tua and Jalen Hurts, while they may have been elite college quarterbacks, maybe we're starting to learn that those two are simply products of the pieces around them rather than their own individual talents. And maybe that's a fair critique of any elite quarterback out there. But I think that's really, we're starting to learn now that Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa have been out of college and now have found, fine success in the NFL. But before, Jalen Hurts had this trio of wide receivers of, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, his job was in question. Tua Tagovailoa's job is in question in Miami. Those aren't necessarily elite quarterbacks. And maybe we'll learn that about Bryce Young as well, but I don't think that's necessarily the case with Bryce Young. So what we've learned is you don't necessarily need an elite quarterback. But what you do need, that has been the same for Georgia and Alabama throughout these continued years of success, you need to have a solid recruiting core and top talent. You need to have some of the best players in the country. And that player could be at the quarterback position, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If you have elite pass rushers, if you have elite pass catchers, and if you have guys up front that can protect the quarterback and that can create holes for your run game, that's really is going to be the bread and butter and the core of that team. So elite talent, not necessarily at the quarterback position, but just good top talent and depth in key position groups. That you have one player go down with an injury, well, that's fine. Lock and load, reload, constant reload. That's what Alabama does best. Is they don't just have top talent at the top of the roster. They have top talent all the way to the bottom of the roster. You need good coaching on the field and off the field. You need to have a good culture built within that program. You need to have buy-in from the locker room into the coaching staff, but you also need to have tacticians. You need to have coaches out there that are making the right decisions in a game. That if it's, 4th and 1, let's say it's at your own 45-yard line, what are you going to do there? What feels right in the context of the game? Off the field coaching, development, and instituting a good culture, but also on the field tacticians, making the right play calls and making the right game calls when they matter the most. Really, overall, what we've learned from these great Alabama teams and from this Georgia team that's been able to go to back national championships. And I believe they're winning back national championships. What it really boils down to is good coaching on and off the field and a solid recruiting core and top talent. So where's LSU in terms of this, this plan, this map, this roadmap that has been written very loosely by Alabama and Georgia? The roadmap that these two teams have followed in order to get back into the college football playoff and to get back into the national championship and to win national championships year after year after year. How far away is LSU? That's what I want to get into coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs, because if you're a small business owner or you're a hiring manager, you know that success in the new year all depends on the team members that you surround yourself with. So that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. So right in the middle of football season, the radio station that I work for, we needed a producer. We needed one like ASAP. And we didn't want to have to go through a really lengthy process of interviewing all of these candidates that might not necessarily fit our needs. Well, LinkedIn Jobs did the hard work for us because they filtered through all the candidates and brought forward to us, and for free, the people that were qualified for the job and had the right things that we needed in order to fill that job. And they helped us immensely. They help quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools, and LinkedIn Jobs goes beyond resume data and does more than maybe some other job sites by using insights from your job posts, company, and their 875 million member profiles to help you put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. Start the new year off right. Start 2023 off right and achieve all of your small business's goals by doing it with the help of LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to and faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. So make sure to check out your brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from the big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So I think that Alabama and Georgia being back in the national championship tonight for the second year in a row, could potentially win 2 in 2 years. I think Georgia followed a roadmap or a formula to success, to national title success, that Alabama has written with Nick Saban for a couple of years. And really, when it boils down to it, elite quarterback isn't necessary. Absolutely helps. But where it really matters is elite talent from the top to the bottom of your roster, and a coaching staff that has instilled a culture both on and off the field, a championship culture, and total buy-in from your locker room. So how far away is LSU from that? How far is LSU away from being the Alabama and the Georgias of the world? Because LSU is always going to be an elite program. It has the reputation of an elite program, even if there's a couple down years, even if there's a couple, sub 500 years when you have 39 scholarship players in a bowl game. LSU is still going to be one of the most elite brands in college football. So LSU will always be talked about like that. But Alabama and Georgia, where it stands now, it's just on a different level because they've had continued success year over year because they're constantly in the national conversation. So how far away is LSU from that? Well, I look at first and foremost, you don't need to have an elite quarterback. Having a game manager quarterback has proven to be sufficient. Georgia in 2021 proved that. Now you need to have an elite defense. You need to have elite pieces around a not elite quarterback, but you don't necessarily need that. But I think where LSU has proven with its quarterback room, with Jaden Daniels, with Garrett Nussmeier, they've got pieces, the building blocks of an elite pass game. They're just not quite there yet. Where they do have right now, though, with Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier, is an offense that's able to put up enough points and to move the chains enough that they can score 30 to 40 to 50 points in a game. I think LSU's offense has improved by leaps and bounds. The run game is solid. The pass game has some work to do. The offensive line, after a year of learning itself, learning each other, learning the quarterback. The offensive line will take leaps and bounds and steps forward. So while I wouldn't necessarily call LSU's offense elite, and I think that's a fair assumption, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it's something that the offense can build upon from last year. It has the building blocks. It has the young guys, the Mason Taylors and the Will Campbells of the young class, of the young talented class, that now can come back in year two and build upon it even more than they did. But I think the key here that LSU has such a solid foundation of is the talent. LSU is always going to have so much talent on its roster because that's just the fortunate part of LSU, of its location, of being right in the middle of a hotbed, of one of the hottest beds of recruiting talent in the entire country, and the fact that LSU really doesn't have a whole lot of in-state competition, that if these kids grow up LSU fans, they're going to LSU. Now, there's nothing stopping them from going to Alabama, or nothing stopping them from going to Ole Miss or Auburn or wherever else around the SEC if they believe that that's a better fit. But LSU has cultivated elite talent. LSU is building depth. I think that's one of Brian Kelly's biggest priorities in this offseason of the recruiting classes and looking through the transfer portal is how can we not just get enough talent for this year, for 2023, but how can we recruit talent that we will have, a constant, turning over of talent every single year. Of you don't have the situation that LSU is facing right now in the secondary of you don't want to just reload the secondary every single year by picking up pieces in the transfer portal that have 1 year of eligibility left, but rather recruiting talent out of high school, recruiting young talent that these guys can come in year after year after year, and you continue to recruit really good talent in all positions year after year after year, that it's just kind of a natural building block of you can just continue to build the foundation, and then that foundation builds up, and those are going to be your top players. And once they leave, well, it's next man up mentality. So I think LSU is building that. I think LSU is probably not is not to the level of, just reload that Alabama and Georgia are, but Georgia was not a success story overnight. And that's what I don't want to get twisted is I'm not expecting LSU football to be the next Alabama or be the next Georgia and have that come to fruition in 2023. But what I'm saying is it took Georgia a few years of development. In Kirby Smart's second year, Georgia was in the national title game in 2017 competing against Alabama, but they didn't make their way back there until 2021. So one, success is not linear, and two, it takes time to have the amount of talent built up and to have the depth built up that Alabama and Georgia have. But I think LSU has a really strong foundation of talented players and talented players that can start to produce for you right now. So in terms of a solid recruiting core and a solid talent core, an elite talent core, I think LSU absolutely is up there. And then when it comes to coaching on and off the field, I think the development off the field has been a really bright spot for LSU, for Brian Kelly and his coaching staff in year one. That the development and the buy-in that we saw from this team from 2021 to 2022 is absolutely a stamp of approval for this coaching staff. That you can go from 39 players in a scholarship game, turn around and win the SEC West, compete for an SEC championship, and be in the Citrus Bowl and blow out your opponent in the Citrus Bowl 63-7. That doesn't come overnight just by no credit to the coaches. That happens because there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So this locker room is bought in. So they're bought into this system, and that it's a strong culture that can be instilled in a short period of time and propel this team moving forward. So I think the off the field coaching, the buy-in in the locker room, the development, the things that we don't see on a Saturday night in the fall, those are all things that I think are the best testament to this coaching staff. The other side is the on the field coaching. I think there are some things that we've seen that have been a little bit questionable, whether that's Brian Kelly's as a tactician of so many times, winning the coin toss and electing to receive, of going 0-3 on fourth down conversions against Tennessee. There has been some mismanagement of some play calling, of some game management, special teams, that kind of special teams coaching that we've seen come to fruition every single week and not get better week over week. Those are all things that can be worked on and things that I think that you need to improve upon if you're going to be in the national championship conversation, because when the margin for error is so razor thin in this league, and especially once you get to a playoff bid, the margin for error is so thin. You can't afford those special teams mistakes. You can't afford to go for it on, 4th and 4 in your own territory. You can't afford to do those kind of things. But I think that those are things that are either, Brian Kelly learns this team, he learns this league, he learns what coaching in the SEC is like, and you adjust on the fly, or that's ultimately this coaching staff's demise. And I don't really want to talk about that after year one, but it's a realistic thing that you're looking at. So I think that the difference between where LSU is now and some of the leaps and bounds that Georgia has taken as a program, where they went from not winning a national title game since the 80s to now potentially winning 2 in 2 years. I think LSU is really close, because the core foundations of these teams, of these Alabama teams, of these Georgia teams, when the offensive coordinators may differ, when the quarterbacks may differ, when you have talent that turns over year over year over year, but they're still in the conversation. When it all comes down to it, it's a solid, deep core of talent from top to bottom at all positions. It's a culture of a championship culture that the entire locker room is bought into, and it's on the field coaching. And I think in all three of those areas, LSU is really close. LSU in year one was one game against Texas A&M away from being, a potential college football playoff contender. They beat Texas A&M, and maybe things fall the right way, and LSU could be that fourth seed. It wasn't crazy to think in year one. So it took some time for Kirby Smart to develop this culture at Georgia, and it wasn't linear. Year two in the national title game, and now here, and then you lose a few too many games year in and year out. You get to the SEC championship, you don't win an SEC championship, but you continue to foster the talent and develop the talent, and you continue to reiterate the same message and the same culture year over year. Because when you buy into that culture, when it's a championship culture, eventually it develops into what Georgia has now, which I believe is maybe the new standard in college football. LSU is not far away. LSU, I would say, we could even have that conversation this year. I think that LSU, under this coaching staff, absolutely can get there. But coming up next, my official predictions for the game tonight, my official predictions for the national championship. We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. There's pro football, college bowl season, basketball, both NBA and college. They've got it all at betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those on BetOnline as well. That's my favorite thing about BetOnline is it's not just a sports book. It's not just a place to wager. It's also a place to get informed about the games that you may want to wager on. It's a place to get smarter as a sports fan and as a sports bettor. Plus, it's super fast and it's super easy to get your betting information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, my official predictions for the national championship game tonight. Look, we saw firsthand in the SEC championship game just how good Georgia is. I mean, I think LSU played their butts off in that game. LSU played Georgia better than any other team on Georgia's schedule this season, other than Ohio State. Ohio State played Georgia much better. It came down to a field goal. But I think that LSU played their butts off against Georgia, and Georgia still won by just shy of 3 touchdowns. I haven't watched a whole ton of TCU football, but I do know that they beat Michigan, who I thought was the second best team in the country. It did take 2 pick sixes to do it. Now, I feel bad saying that. I feel guilty saying that because I asked myself, like, what more do I need to see from TCU to make me believe that they could really be, a national champion? What more do I need to see from them to say, like, yeah, they can compete against Georgia in this game? And I don't know if it's necessarily more about TCU than it is about Georgia, that I just think Georgia is that good. That I just think Georgia can stop what you do best, and whatever that is. I watched the Georgia-Tennessee game, and Tennessee was an offense that no defense in college football could even slow down, much less stop. And Georgia completely shut Tennessee's offense down. Georgia made Tennessee's offense look like a just run-of-the-mill, average college football offense. And we know that's not the truth. I just think that Georgia is that good. I just think that Georgia is that well coached. I just think that Georgia has too much talent and plays way too physical for any other team to keep up with. Ohio State came close. They came pretty damn close. I just don't know if TCU is at the level of one talent and two toughness to keep up with Georgia. Maybe I'm completely selling TCU short. Maybe I need to watch that TCU Michigan game with a little bit more detail and see really what it was that TCU did that could make one of the toughest teams in the country look, abysmal at halftime. I think that TCU is going to want to run the ball. I think that's what TCU did really well against Michigan, which was a little bit shocking to me that TCU was able to run against Michigan with such ease. One of TCU's backup quarterbacks ran for over 150 yards against Michigan. If Michigan can't stop it, can Georgia? I think that TCU is going to want to try to run the ball. I think there's some injuries that are kind of hindering TCU a good bit. But I think overall, Georgia's just that good. TCU is really solid in the passing game, but Georgia's just that much better in the secondary. TCU can put up a whole lot of points, but when Georgia needs to put up that many points, they can't do. They put up 50 against this LSU defense that had been pretty lights out all season long. The spread here is 12.5. That's a ridiculously large spread for a national championship game, a game that should be between two of the best teams in college football. Call me crazy. I'm taking Georgia to cover the spread. I think Georgia's going to be able to win by 2 touchdowns. I think that's a bad thing for college football when a national championship game could be a difference of 2 touchdowns. But I just think Georgia's just that good. But that's my take. Do however you want to do it. And if you're going to wager with betonline.net, my very favorite sports book. But I just think it's going to be a blowout. I think Georgia's going to go back to back. And I think that we are going to start to look at Stetson Bennett a whole lot differently than we are now. Or at least I think he deserves that from us. I think that final score, I think it's going to be 42-28 Georgia. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Both teams can put up a whole lot of points. I think that Georgia's going to wear them down in the second half. But that's going to do it for me today. Enjoy the national championship game tonight. Coming up on tomorrow's podcast, I want to do a full breakdown, a final thought of the regular season, of Brian Kelly's first season as a head coach at LSU, my full assessment of the season. We'll get into that all tomorrow on Locked On LSU. But thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make your second listen today. Locked On College Basketball, brand new podcast from the Locked On Network. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything that you need to know on and off the court. So hear from big name experts, coaches, players throughout the basketball landscape. It's a great listen. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.